a Facebook post, a few angry comments, and within hours, a 17-year-old girl lay dying in a park. What began as an ordinary day in Columbus, Georgia, ended in chaos and heartbreak. A teenager full of joy, laughter, and promise, gone before the sun had even set. The kind of tragedy that makes parents hold their children closer.
I'm heartbroken, it's pain. It's just a lot for me to just know that my sister's not here with me anymore.
A balloon release and candlelight vigil for 17-year-old Markayla Marshall.
And communities ask, how did it come to this? This is the story of Markayla Kalia Marshall, a bright and spirited young woman whose name would echo across social media for all the wrong reasons. One online exchange, a brief, heated moment, would set in motion a chain of events that no one could stop. Within hours, what started on a phone screen became a real-world confrontation, and that confrontation became fatal. By the time the gunfire stopped, lives had been destroyed, and an entire city was left reeling. The details of this case shocked not only those who knew Markayla, but anyone who has ever believed that teenage drama couldn't turn deadly. The words traded online were harsh, the emotions raw. Yet no one could have expected that anger and pride would end in a tragedy that still haunts Georgia to this day. Stay tuned till the end. You won't believe what unfolded that night, and the truth investigators later uncovered will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? What makes this case so chilling isn't just the violence, but the age of those involved. Teenagers, barely old enough to drive, caught in a cycle of anger that exploded into irreversible loss. A single decision, a few heated words, and a moment of fear changed everything. Police would later describe the scene at Primus King Park as chaotic. People running, crying, screaming for help. Among the victims was Markayla, struck down during what should have been a simple argument between peers. But as investigators began to dig deeper, what they found was even more shocking than anyone expected. This wasn't just an argument gone wrong. It was a chain reaction fueled by pride, fear, and the dangerous influence of social media, one that would end in heartbreak, outrage, and the loss of a young life that had barely begun. 17, that magical age when life feels just beginning. Can you remember being that age? Hopeful, carefree, thinking the world is wide open ahead of you? For Markayla Kalia Marshall, that was exactly how it felt. She was in that season of life when dreams start to take shape, when laughter fills every corner of a day, and when the future seems like a promise waiting to be claimed. Markayla grew up in Columbus, Georgia, a place where family ties run deep, where everyone seems to know someone's cousin, aunt, or friend. It's a city with heart, proud, resilient, and full of stories that blend struggle with community strength. Within that close circle, Markayla was known as the one who could lift anyone's mood. Friends said her laugh was unforgettable, loud, unfiltered, contagious. The kind of laugh that made even a bad day easier to bear. Those who knew her best described her as loyal, the type of friend who stood by you through anything. At home, she was the kind of daughter who checked in, helped out, and teased her siblings in that playful way only big sisters can. Her family meant everything to her, and she meant everything to them. To her mother, she wasn't just a child. She was a piece of joy that made every sacrifice worth it. In school, Markayla wasn't the loudest in the room, but people noticed her. She had a spark, a blend of kindness and confidence that drew others in. She loved taking photos, hanging out with friends, and posting fun moments online. Social media, to her, was just an extension of her world, a space to share smiles, songs, and inside jokes. No one could have imagined that the same digital world that connected her to friends would one day become part of the reason she was gone. She dreamed of becoming someone who made a difference. Perhaps in healthcare, perhaps in the arts. She hadn't decided yet, but that was okay. At 17, there was time to decide. There were birthdays to celebrate, goals to chase, and moments to live. She had plans, and her family had plans for her. Graduation, college, a bright future. That's why her loss felt so heavy for the people who loved her. This wasn't just another name on the news. It was a young life filled with promise and possibility. When you listen to those who talk about her now, their voices still break. Not only because she's gone, but because she never got the chance to see who she would become. Her story is not one of gossip or scandal. It's about the fragility of youth, the weight of choices, and the heartbreak that comes when a moment of anger shatters a lifetime of dreams. But like so many young lives, Markayla's world would collide with a moment of anger that no one could take back. It began on Facebook, a single post mocking a friend's grandmother, words that might seem trivial to some, but for the teens involved, they carried weight. Pride, offense, and the need to defend reputation. In the world of adolescence, small slights can feel enormous, and digital screens have a way of magnifying them. Markayla and her friends quickly found themselves in the center of a growing storm. Comments were exchanged. Opinions clashed. Messages were shared, and screens were screenshot. In a matter of hours, what started as a personal insult had gained an audience. Dozens, then hundreds, watching and reacting. Rumors spread, posts circulated, and videos were shared, creating an online tension that would not stay online for long. For teenagers, the line between digital life and real life is often invisible. Pride can escalate, impulsiveness takes over, and a moment of anger online can turn into action in the physical world. For Markayla, that boundary was crossed before anyone could intervene. A small confrontation earlier that evening, in which she used pepper spray during a disagreement, became the spark that fanned the flames of retaliation. We've all seen it. One post, one comment, and suddenly, it's a war online. But for Markayla and her friends, this argument would become deadly. Friends and neighbors would later describe an atmosphere of tension, where every glance or word could ignite tempers already pushed to the edge. The psychological dynamics were clear: fear, pride, and the instinct to respond when challenged. Teenagers are not always equipped to handle conflict rationally, especially when emotions are inflamed in front of an audience. Social media made every action public, every insult amplified, and every reaction permanent. As the hours passed, the situation escalated. What might have been resolved with a conversation or an apology became a chain of actions that neither side could easily stop. Messages, posts, and short video clips circulated, intensifying feelings of anger and betrayal. Those watching online were unwitting participants, fueling the tension without even knowing it. By the time the group headed to Primus King Park, the stage was set. A moment of pride, a quick reaction, and a lingering grudge had aligned in a way that would make violence almost inevitable. Do you think social media is making real-life violence worse? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The events of that day were not random. They were the outcome of choices, reactions, and the subtle ways online conflicts can migrate into the real world, sometimes with irreversible consequences. The evening of March 31st, 2022, began like any other at Primus King Park, a neighborhood recreation area in Columbus, where teens and families often gathered. The sun was low in the sky, and the park's familiar benches and fields were alive with chatter, laughter, and the rhythm of ordinary life. Among the teenagers present that day was Markayla Marshall, enjoying the company of friends in what should have been a routine evening. But tension had been building all day, and the arguments from social media were no longer confined to screens. Words exchanged online had followed them into real life. Simmering just beneath the surface, what started as raised voices soon escalated. Shouting matched by glares, frustration, and anger grew in intensity. Markayla, reacting in a split-second moment during the confrontation, deployed pepper spray against one of the teens. It was a defensive act, brief and impulsive, but in that instant, the situation tipped toward irreversibility. Moments later, Sienna Turpin, 16, and her sister Eureka entered the scene. Tension that had been mounting online and in person collided. Witnesses recalled a sudden shift. The atmosphere thickened with fear and adrenaline, and the casual gathering transformed into a moment of crisis. Then came the gunfire. Witnesses reported that the first shots rang out sharply, breaking the air. Panic spread immediately. Teens scattered across the park, some seeking cover behind trees and benches, others screaming for help. Amid the chaos, Markayla was struck. In the flurry of confusion, her younger sister was also injured, but survived after receiving prompt medical attention. Paramedics arrived swiftly. The sound of sirens mingled with the cries of friends and bystanders. Markayla was rushed to Piedmont Columbus Regional Hospital, but despite the efforts of medical personnel, she was pronounced dead that evening at 7:49 p.m. The loss sent shockwaves through her family, friends, and the community. The scene at the park lingered in the minds of those who witnessed it. What had once been a place of laughter, soccer games, and casual gatherings became a site of grief and terror. Emergency lights flashed against the asphalt and grass, while officers moved quickly to secure the area and gather statements. Families who had been enjoying the evening suddenly found themselves confronting the fragility of life in real time. In the aftermath, neighbors and friends described a surreal feeling, a space that once carried joy, now marked by tragedy. One resident recalled the mix of disbelief and sorrow, emphasizing how quickly ordinary moments can turn devastating. Imagine, one ordinary evening, gone in seconds. How does a simple argument transform into a moment that changes lives forever? In Markayla's case, a few online words, a defensive reaction, and the presence of firearms combined to create a deadly convergence. That night, the park became a stark reminder of how quickly conflict can escalate when emotions and danger collide. Even now, the memory of the lights, the sirens, and the sudden emptiness of a fallen teenager haunts those who were there. The community would never forget the sound, the panic, or the abrupt end to a life that had only just begun. The moment the gunfire ceased, law enforcement moved swiftly. Officers secured Primus King Park, tending to victims and calling in emergency medical teams. Statements were gathered, the scene photographed, and physical evidence collected. In those first critical hours, detectives began piecing together what had occurred, relying not only on eyewitness accounts, but also on the growing trail of digital evidence from social media. Videos captured on phones, messages exchanged online, and posts shared across platforms became key pieces of the investigation. Authorities quickly identified a link between the park shooting and the online conflict that had escalated earlier in the evening. The focus shifted to the Turpin sisters, Sienna, 16, and her older sister Eureka. Police issued warrants for both young women, citing probable cause connecting them to the shooting. It became clear that the confrontation at the park was not random. It was a calculated response fueled by anger, perceived disrespect, and the events of the earlier pepper spray incident. The investigation relied heavily on interviews with witnesses who had been present at the park. Friends, neighbors, and bystanders described the chaos, the moments leading up to the shooting, and the rapid unfolding of events. Combined with videos that circulated online, authorities were able to establish a timeline and reconstruct the actions of those involved. One clip, in particular, captured a moment later, cited in court. An alleged exhortation from Eureka telling Sienna to fire. Respectfully presented in legal filings, this moment underscored the serious nature of the confrontation and became a key element of the prosecution's case. Within days, law enforcement located and apprehended Eureka during a traffic stop, while Sienna had already been taken into custody. The sisters' arrests sent shockwaves through Columbus, leaving many community members in disbelief that teenagers so young could be involved in such a violent act. Families who frequented the park, friends of the victims, and neighbors all struggled to reconcile the age of the perpetrators with the severity of the crime. As investigators continued to build their case, a clear motive emerged: retaliation for the earlier incident involving pepper spray. Authorities explained that the sisters felt provoked and responded in a way that would forever alter multiple lives. The connection between online and offline conflict became a central theme in understanding how quickly situations can escalate, especially when weapons are involved. Community reactions were intense. Many residents expressed grief and anger, questioning how young individuals could make decisions with such devastating consequences. Candlelight vigils, social media tributes, and heartfelt messages from friends and family reflected the collective shock and sorrow. Parents, teachers, and youth advocates pointed to the incident as a warning about the dangers of unresolved disputes and the influence of social media on adolescent behavior. If you're still watching, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more stories like this. The investigation had revealed the depth of the tragedy and the complexity of the case. By connecting witness statements, video evidence, and the sequence of events, authorities were able to move forward with charges that would eventually lead to legal resolution. The community's attention remained fixed on the unfolding story, waiting for justice while grappling with the harsh reality of what had happened that evening at Primus King Park. The courtroom in Columbus became a focal point for grief, tension, and the search for answers. As the legal process unfolded, the public watched closely, hoping to understand how two teenagers could be held responsible for a tragedy that had rocked the community. Prosecutors presented a clear narrative. The shooting was a deliberate act of violence. Evidence, witness testimony, and video recordings painted a picture of a confrontation that escalated beyond control, but not without intention. They argued that the actions of the Turpin sisters were a direct response to the earlier incident, and that the decision to bring a firearm into the park and use it had irreversible consequences. The defense offered a different perspective. They claimed that the sisters acted out of fear, a belief that they were in danger, and that their response, though tragic, was an impulsive reaction to a perceived threat. The legal arguments centered on whether the sisters' actions could be considered self-defense and how their youth and emotional state influenced their choices. As the case moved forward, attorneys from both sides negotiated a resolution. In February 2023, the sisters reached a plea agreement, accepting guilt for voluntary manslaughter and aggravated assault. The plea spared the need for a full jury trial, while still ensuring that the sisters would face significant consequences for their actions. Each sister received a sentence spanning more than 15 years, a reflection of the gravity of the crime and the court's effort to balance accountability with the recognition of their age. For Markayla's family, the resolution brought complicated emotions. Relief came from the certainty of sentencing, the knowledge that those responsible would be held in custody. Yet relief was intertwined with heartbreak. No amount of legal consequence could restore the life lost. No sentence could fill the void left in a family, a school, or a community. Interviews with relatives revealed raw grief, tempered by a desire to see justice served, even imperfectly. The community grappled with lingering questions Could justice ever truly compensate for the loss of a young life? How could two teenagers, barely out of childhood themselves, commit an act with such devastating consequences? Parents, educators, and neighbors struggled to make sense of it, reflecting on the factors that led to the tragedy: social media escalation, impulsive decisions, and a momentary lapse in judgment that changed everything. Sometimes justice brings answers. Other times, it just reminds us how irreversible loss can be. The courtroom proceedings, plea agreements, and sentences offered structure and consequence, but they could not erase the pain, the memories, or the absence left behind. For those who loved Markayla, the legal resolution was only one step in a long journey of healing. The community continued to mourn, to reflect, and to search for ways to prevent similar tragedies in the future. In the days following the shooting, Primus King Park became a gathering place for grief and remembrance. Friends, neighbors, and family members organized vigils, candlelight ceremonies, and balloon releases, turning a space of loss into a temporary sanctuary for collective mourning. Each light held hope for healing, each balloon a silent message to a young life lost too soon. Markayla's family spoke openly about their heartbreak, emphasizing the human cost behind the headlines. Her older sister and relatives urged the public to stop sharing videos of the incident, asking for privacy and compassion in a moment that had already shattered their world. One family member said, in essence, that the footage only prolongs the pain for those left behind, turning tragedy into spectacle. Neighbors and friends recounted the shock and trauma that rippled through the community, a place that once hosted laughter, soccer games, and everyday gatherings now carried the weight of fear and sorrow. Parents watched their own children more closely, aware that moments of conflict could escalate in ways that were both sudden and irreversible. The emotional impact extended beyond the immediate circle of family and friends. Teachers, youth mentors, and local residents reflected on the fragility of adolescent life and the powerful influence of anger, impulsive decisions, and digital interactions. The story of Markayla became more than a single incident. It became a cautionary tale, a reminder that every statistic is a story, and every name represents a heartbeat that's gone. Through candlelight and collective remembrance, the community sought not only to honor Markayla's life, but also to confront the larger issues her death highlighted: the dangers teens face when disagreements escalate, the role of social media in amplifying conflict, and the pressing need for empathy and guidance among young people. Even amidst sorrow, the gatherings offered moments of connection and reflection. Shared grief became a way to support one another, to express outrage and sadness, and to pledge that her memory would not fade. The loss was immeasurable, but the presence of a grieving community reminded everyone that Markayla had mattered. Her life had touched many, and her story would continue to resonate. Markayla Marshall's story is more than a headline. It is a stark reminder of how quickly social media-fueled conflicts can escalate into irreversible tragedy. A post, a comment, a moment of pride or anger, all can ripple outward, affecting lives in ways no one anticipates. For teenagers, the boundaries between online interactions and real-world consequences are often unclear, and impulsive decisions can carry devastating results. This case also illustrates the power of emotions in shaping outcomes. Pride, fear, and frustration can grow in seconds, and a split-second choice can change everything. In communities across the nation, parents, educators, and youth workers witness the same pressures: the need to defend oneself, to respond, to be recognized. Without guidance and early intervention, these pressures can lead to outcomes like the one that claimed Markayla's life. Conflict mediation, education, and open communication are essential. Teens must learn not only to navigate disagreement, but to recognize the serious consequences of escalation. Communities, families, and schools all play a role in creating environments where anger can be addressed constructively before it turns into violence. We often talk about justice, but the real question is prevention. How do we stop the next tragedy before it begins? Markayla's life and untimely death are a call to action. Her story is a reminder that awareness, empathy, and intervention can save lives before irreversible choices are made. If this story moved you, please share it. Awareness saves lives. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss our next investigation here on True Crime Records. And remember, every life has a story. Let's make sure they're never forgotten. Markayla's name, her laughter, and her dreams endure because people remember. In the quiet moments after the sirens fade and the park lights go dark, her story reminds us all of the fragility of youth, the weight of decisions, and the responsibility each of us carries to prevent similar losses. Her life may have ended too soon, but the lessons it leaves behind resonate far beyond Columbus, Georgia, echoing in every community, every conversation, and every heart willing to listen.